That's what we're doing.
Okay, everybody. This is Halfjack, and he's doing a talk on bare Linux install from network. And so Ben has everything set up here to teach you about Linux, except that he can't figure out how to do this.
I said, first time using the Linux Office tools, so this mouse thing I'm not used to.
Oh, a mouse.
Don't give me shit, it's a good thing. Alright, let's get back. So, there. Get back to the start. Hello, everybody, welcome. I'm not a Linux expert, but I play one in the classroom. So I teach at a small community college in South Georgia, and really, I do.
Not from South.
Oh yeah, Bainbridge, Georgia.
We'll talk after.
All right, but I know enough to stay, a couple of months ahead of the students when I'm trying to teach stuff. And in the environment of a classroom lab, a lot of times it's great doing something on one computer, but man, you don't want to have to do it all 25 computers. And so I look for solutions, and oftentimes finding Linux that really helps me out on setting up labs and doing training and stuff like that. It does have some other applications though for just like using computers, and you need to boot up and do something on the machine, like somebody has a machine they forgot to run its password, and of course you can boot up NTFS softline password changer, which is a Linux utility. All you got to do is find the USB or CD that you put the live CD on and put it in the machine and boot it up, unless they don't have a live, they don't have a CD on the netbook, or it's an old machine and it doesn't support booting with USB, etc., etc. So if we do have some other ways of getting the operating system going, it's kind of handy. And one of those ways is, it advances on there, but it doesn't advance on my screen, so I'll have to look around. Is what we call PXE, or PXE, and it provides a boot option from the network. This allows, if the computer supports it, to allow us to say, well, instead of going from the hard drive, instead of going from the CD drive, or even the USB device, I want to talk to a network server and get the files that we want to run at the initial start of the machine from this network server. So, that's going to be really irritating. So, that's Office tools, not my thing. Command line alarm. Okay. So, to set up PXE and use it, what we have to do is get a server set up, which there's 2 or 3 elements on the server. Then, if you want to use ISO, a live CD, or an install CD for your favorite flavor of Ubuntu or whatever, then you have to get that, put it on, and set it up a certain way on the server. Get the client machine to boot from the network card. Pick whatever action you want from the bootloader menu it gives you, and then go ahead and do the install or boot up the utility or whatever. So, these colors don't work that well, I'm sorry. Mostly, you got to have PXE support on the client. That's the big thing. If it doesn't work, you're out of luck. But the standard is from '99, so most computers won't have that on there. You got to set up a DHCP server because it gives a key link to the file that is going to get things started. The TFTP client is going to send the files that the DHCP server said to give, and then finally either NFS or HTTP server to send out the rest of the files. So we can do it to boot straight into an operating system, but a lot of times you want a bootloader to sort of pick and choose from. So the PXE Linux.0 file is basically that's just a bootloader. It's basically a network rub type of thing, or the ISO Linux that comes on install CDs. It just gets going that you pick the choices and what you want to do, stuff like that. The options on it, the menu points to the files that are on the network server. They actually run the install or run the live CD, that sort of stuff. The menu choices that you get are going to come from some configuration files that you can modify or just sort of go with the standard ones if they have the options. You want sort of customize it. Technically, you can make a server where you had 10 options. Boot up a password editor, boot up ultimate UBCD for Linux, distance remote boot for Linux, Ubuntu install, Ubuntu Live. Just to have a choice for each one of those, and all of those be stored on a central server on the network. So, how do we use it? Well, I've already said it. We can boot up a live CD, we can boot up installs, utilities. We can install the client or install the operating system to the client, but we do need to be sure that if you do that, there's one little thing. If you install from the network, you'll have to reset your repositories later on so that if you want to install a piece of software, it doesn't go try to look for this server that you just had turned on for the install process. So, just a simple checking box of use of the universal repositories. My favorite use for this is remote cloning of drives because, like I said, I got a lab of 25 computers. I don't want to go to each one and set them up, so I set up one, I make an image of that, and then I multicast out to 25 computers, and in 25 minutes on the gigabit switch, all of those machines have a fresh install of the operating system. Pretty useful.
Can you put the repository change in prior to that?
Yes. Like I said, it's only if you're installing across the network, then you have the repository is issued, and really that's I only use that.
It'll be in the clone master.
Yeah, it'll be in the clone master. I only really use the install across the network for students demonstrating installs. But if you had, like I said, if you had a lot of different machines that you sort of needed to pick and choose which version to install on, you wouldn't have to maintain a fan of CDs or DVD boot disks. You could just put these on the server. I'm talking about how to do this with individual packages in the Linux environment, but there's several collections that do it. I've not really worked with them. I've just read about them. But there's one called Fog that sets up servers. I've read that DNS Mass does it. Distance remote boot for Linux, which was a great product. If you haven't ever seen it in practice, it's a really handy thing. That's the one it's got the Clonezilla server part of it that I use to clone labs. And like I said, the Clonezilla and distance remote boot for Linux is probably, it's like the Windows utilities that says you can take a picture of your hard drive at any time and come back to it. It's not as maybe sophisticated as some of the ones. I'm thinking, what is that, a Racos backup for $25 for Windows or something. But with the distance remote boot for Linux and the Clonezilla, you can image your hard drive, store that image wherever you want, and at any point in the future, no matter what has happened to the stuff on that hard drive, you boot it up from the server or from a live disk, and just write that image back to it, and you are rolled back in time to that point. So whatever happened to your machine, virus or bad install or whatever, it's gone. So, like I said, the packages that we would look at would be TFTP, which TFTP is all wrapped up in a lot of different stuff. It's part of the INET-V project, so sometimes you have to set it up and tell it if you want to set it, run it as a daemon and other stuff. But go to the internet, either go with one of the combo projects or go to the internet and get the instructions on setting up TFTP. The main thing here is that if you use the sort of the default one, the TFTP.hpa for Ubuntu, you need to sort of look at the file, the configuration file for it, which is etc default TFTP-hpa. Check and see what the directory is, and you can either use that directory or change it to something else. I get sometimes tired of typing varlive before everything, so a lot of times I'll set it up to a different directory, but whatever directory is, you just need to know it for later. Also, oops, I messed up on that one. there is a line there. Let's not get saved right by. There's a line in the default configuration that says to do something with the TFTP, and it's got a -- secure option. And I haven't absolutely worked it out, and that's the problem. But sometimes the TFTP gives me a problem, and if I comment out that secure switch, it goes away. So I don't know if it's coincidence or if that's the main thing. But a lot of times, if you get rid of the last line in that configuration file, which is the secure language, I was typing it in and didn't get right. But if you won't boot from the TFTP, a lot of times that secure switch is the problem. So just change that file here. So set up the DHCP. When you do that, if this is just sort of if it's not your regular server, two things to keep in mind is that you do need to set a static IP for that, for the DHCP to work properly, and also isolate that section of your network. If you're cloning the lab, you don't need to have computers from other places possibly grabbing DNS stuff, DHCP stuff from your server. So just work in an isolated environment to prevent problems with people down the hall. So we install it. Either DHCP 3.1 or the ICS DHCP, or is it ISC-DHCP one. There's a couple of choices there. The main thing is that we'll have to edit the configuration file, dhcpd.conf. And the important settings are the next server settings. Can y'all see that at all? Yeah. Okay. Just from this angle, I'm not sure if the color's showing up. So there's the next server setting, which needs to be the setting of your server. Okay. And then the important thing is this file name, which says this is the file to send to clients when they start up to get the ball rolling. And like I said, it can be just straight like a VMLANZ file, or in this case, the PXE Linux zero file. All of that's on one line, just of course ran out of room. So that's sort of the key thing. This ties the start from the file that TFTP is going to serve. DHCP tells it to, this is the one you're going to use, and then PXE is the one that gets it out there and tells them this is what you need to do. And then we set up Apache or NFS, depending on how things go. For the basic install, like I was going to do today, the HTTP one is the simplest setup. You can also do NFS to boost the live CDs. And I think there's a way to do them both, but I haven't been able to track it down. If anybody knows, good stuff. So you install Apache, get it running. Apache's install smoothly, you don't have to do too much. But we need files for it. And this is the part that we have to put a few pieces together. If you want to do the install for Ubuntu, I haven't ever tried it for the CentOS system or a Red Hat world or anything like that. But there's an alternate version of the CD rather than the standard desktop ISO that you would get when you download it. And we want that one for doing the network install. It's got the right PXE Linux file. And if you want to do just a live CD or utilities, just get the regular ISO files. Don't ever have to put them on a disk, on a CD or anything like that, but just get the files. We can extract and mount them, or I prefer to just mount them and then do links to them, because that way the new version comes out next month, you just replace the ISO, and as long as they haven't changed the directory structure too much of the CD, the links will point to the right places once you remount. So, if you only do links, you have a thing where you can't modify the configuration files to get it, to change where, add options to the menus or change the bootloader screen like that or something like that. Plug this up so we can see what's going to happen here. Yes, that's
Your sheet is blocking.
Now, move it around and get it arranged. So, after we mount ISO, We just need to copy that, or sorry, to get to the point where we want to mount our ISO, we just copy it onto the file system somewhere. Could be anywhere. I usually just make a home ISO folder to keep them in. It doesn't have to be on the home computer. But once we get the file on there, we want to mount it using the loop option, which is a way of just getting the ISO files to act like open files rather than just one big file. So basically, it takes the file system from the ISO and adds it to our file system, so we can browse through files, copy out of them, make notes to them, like that. And like I do usually change the name of the ISO to a standard thing like latest Unix or new Unix, so that I can script the mounts, and all I do is put the new ISO on there with the same name, and all the scripts will still work. So we create a link. It's got to be a soft link, so we do LEM-S. Since it's technically on a different file system, I know the numbers wouldn't match up. The place where I put the mount was mount Ubuntu, and then in the install netboot directory are the files, the PXE Linux 0 file. And so we put a link in the TFTP boot netboot one, which is wherever you said it, bar live or whatever. I just changed it to from bar live to this one, getting up at the other side. But anyway, just a link from the netboot folder on the ISO to the TFTP directory so the files can be served up. And then in the www directory, www, we need to have access to the whole CD. So we just create a folder called Ubuntu, a link to the folder, Ubuntu from the mount point Ubuntu, misspelling there. It should be Ubuntu. So, like I said, if we go back a second, the mount point is Ubuntu, just to keep it in a handy place. Could be anywhere again, but it's easy to be directed. All right, with those things loaded, we don't have to change anything else as far as if we want to go with the standard menu that the alternate install CD will offer, which is pretty standard. If we stop at this point, if we shut down our computer, all of our services start and stop, and mount's lost, and depending on the install process, the services may or may not start up automatically and will reboot. So if you create it and then come back a week later and need to use it somewhere else, and this machine is going to shut down, you just have to run through the firing up the services and mount the ISO again, so the links will have something to point to, and you're back at the point where you started. Once the initial setup configuration files is done, you don't have to do it every time. At the client, when you boot it up, you would hit the F12 button. Question?
Can you back up my slide again?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The first bullet there, boot up client and proceed. That's where I got the loss. How do you boot it if no OS is installed? Now I see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is all on the server. Okay. So everything is sitting there. The machine is sitting here. I'm going to plug it up to our network. And this is the machine, this is the server, this is the machine that we want to install the OS across, or run the live CD, or do, copy an image off for distance remote boot for Linux, whatever. So when we boot the client up, we hit the key to get into the boot menu, usually F12, even across manufacturers, most of them have decided on F12. You might run into a few oddballs, it's a difficult. Depending on your system, you may have to go in and activate and BIOS that the Ethernet card is activated with PXE capabilities. Dell's are a little bad about that. They'll have, the option on the boot list, they'll have the choice that says boot from network card, except the option that lets the network card to do it is turned off. So even though it's on the list there, you got to go change it somewhere else before it will show up in the initial boot screen to be able to choose it. Once you choose it, you get a list. It'll say, hard drive, the CD, floppy, USB device, and network card, onboard NIC, or something like that. You pick that choice, hit enter, and it goes off and talks. Well, does the DHCP request? It hopefully finds your DHCP server. That server says, here, use this address, and here is the file that you want to request. So PXE is going to request from the TFTP server, which is the next server address that we set up in our configuration file and all that. We're going to set it up to do the PXE Linux or one of the other files. And that file will be transferred through the TFTP server across the network to our client. It will load it. If it's the PXE Linux, it will give us a menu that looks a lot like the install menu that you would get off of the CD. We would, at that point, tell it to, at that point, we would just tell it, I want to install, and hit enter, and it would sort of go through the normal steps. So let me see if I can show you that. I'm moving. What's there?
It's on the side.
What?
It's on the side.
On the other side?
On the side.
On my side?
Left side.
This side. All right. So turn it on. There we go. There we go. All right. So I hit F12 when it booted. It gives me the choices for the hard drive, the CD. No USB drive is plugged in, so it doesn't hold that. So I hit enter here. Nothing's happening. There we go. And we'll look at the video, but we got a flash of stuff as it talks to the TFTP server. Got the book file. I changed the splash graphic to show that it's definitely not a CD that's hidden in this machine. There's no strings attached to it. Nothing to see. The book menu. I was trying to get the live CD to work with this one, but I could not get it working today to demonstrate. So we'll partially go through the install, since this is more laptop and we don't want to erase it. But we hit install, hit enter. And again, pulling from the network, it's talking to the TFTP server, pulling up the VM Linux, the initial RAM disk, and giving us the text install options, since it doesn't want to do a whole lot of network traffic for the graphical install. But basically, it would just progress on through until it got to a point where it says, how do you want to partition this? And the normal install process would go on from there. Get through there. So, being brief to try to get us back on schedule, but any questions on the whole process?
Although there are simpler ways to do what I'm about to suggest, it occurred to me that you could also use this to create a customized virtual machine.
Yes. Yes. In fact, I think there are a lot of places that that you could set it up as sort of a virtual machine image server. Yep. So you can just pop them in there whenever you wanted to, switch your virtual machine or update it or test out something or something like that. So, like I said, my favorite thing is the diskless remote boot for Linux project, because It has a lot. It basically scripts a ton of this stuff. It sets it up so that you can do images. You can use it to boot, Linux on a machine that you don't normally have Linux on. If you don't want to multi-boot a machine, don't have the hard drive space, don't want to go through the bootloader changes, but you sometimes need to run Linux. Well, just have a server there, and instead of letting it boot from the hard drive, boot from the server, and there's Linux running on that machine. You can have persistent, save files, access network stuff. Of course, fill them with the NTFS partition if you need to, in case of password changes or something like that.
And you could do it in the hidden folder.
Yeah. Well, the diabolical part says, well, if somebody comes in and they want to get your stuff and they take your laptop, well, if your laptop's running the machine off of the server and everything's there, then the stuff didn't go with the laptop. It's only running. It's a thin client, and that's one of the things that this does provide for is thin clients. I've seen environments where they had business workstations, and they could, somebody could come in, they could boot up a Windows machine and have access to their regular user folder stored on the network server, or they could choose to boot up a Linux, machine and have access to the same home folder on the network. So their data files were nice and separate, and the OS that they booted was up to them, and it happened totally through the network. So it goes. Nice if you want to upgrade the image from the network, you totally start it from the network. That's another thing. So, any other questions, comments, sir?
Well, I work in Georgia Tech. We use this quite a bit. It works really well.
Mm-hmm.
There are some security configurations if you're in a large environment. Where we are, we've got 18,001 of these Uber hackers on campus.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, a couple of things you have to be aware of, DHCP and DHCP, or TFTP, are not terribly secure.
Not at all.
And whoever answers first on DHCP is the DHCP server. So we had a problem where somebody actually plugged the Linksys router, plugged the LAN port into the wall, and so it started responding with DHCP requests, and people would plug their machine in expecting to be on the network, find themselves locked on the network, they had no network access. It's awesome. And of course, it spanned the entire campuses. They were not happy.
And also a huge security thing, because they could have, linked up and passed that on to the internet, but just monitored all the traffic coming through.
Yes, and so the thing we do is whenever we pixie boot machines like this, we actually stick them on a subnet that's isolated from everything else, and it blocks DHCP requests from actually going off the LAN to protect from this happening. Now that's important. It's not such a big deal for a workstation, but it is a big deal if you're building a server and somebody decides they want to give you a Trojan image for your server. So you have to be aware of that in large environments.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's why I recommended the isolation of the network when you're doing this, because both you don't want to give DHCP stuff out and push, have options. People will be able to, let me see what this option does, and wipe their machine by installing Linux on it. But also, you don't want a machine to boot up from another server besides the one you're doing. That's a good point. Is that the danger kind of goes both ways with that DHCP server.
Yeah, once you have it set up in a large environment, it makes it really nice. It gives people actually the ability to re-image their machine quite easily on their own and get a standard build. So it works very well.
Yep. So that's why I love it. Not everybody's going to have a use for it, but you have to manage 10 or 15 machines, which happens even in a small office or happens all over the place in academic environments. Lots and lots of potential here. We're not nearly as large as Bush Tech. We do find uses for all that. All right. Well, thank you.